The antique mirror arrived on Tuesday, October 13th, wrapped in brown paper that smelled like death and old roses. I hadn't ordered anything, yet there it was on my doorstep in downtown Portland, Oregon, with a handwritten note that made my hands tremble. For David Chun, from your grandfather's estate. He said, "You'd know what to do when the time came. The mirror remembers everything, David. Every face that's ever looked into it. Every soul that's ever been trapped inside. Be very careful what you wish to see. Margaret Thornfield, Thornfield and Associates Estate Law." I stared at that note for 10 minutes, my coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter. My grandfather had been dead for 8 months. His estate was settled by Morrison and Associates, lawyers I knew personally, who'd handled everything meticulously. I'd never heard of Margaret Thornfield or her law firm. More disturbing was this. My grandfather had spent his final 3 years in Cedar Grove Mental Health Facility, claiming that mirrors were doorways to parallel dimensions. The doctors said it was dementia-induced paranoia. The family believed it was grief over losing my grandmother. I was about to discover he'd been completely, terrifyingly sane. My name is David Chun. I'm 28 years old, a senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions here in Portland. I work mostly remote, live alone in a converted loft apartment, and until this story began, my biggest concerns were debugging code and whether I'd remember to pay my electric bill. I believed in logic, in rational explanations, in the comforting predictability of ones and zeros, cause and effect, problem and solution. That belief died the moment I unwrapped that mirror and saw my reflection smile back at me while my own face remained completely serious. Because I wasn't smiling. I wasn't even close to smiling. But my reflection was grinning like it had just heard the funniest joke in the world. And its eyes were looking directly at me, not following my gaze like reflections should. They were studying me, evaluating me, like a predator watching prey. The mirror was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. 6 feet tall, Victorian era, with an ornate silver frame carved with roses, thorns, and symbols I didn't recognize but that made my skin crawl just looking at them. The glass itself seemed to have unusual depth. Not like looking at a surface, but like peering into dark water. I propped it against my bedroom wall, telling myself I'd research its value later. Antique mirrors this elaborate could be worth serious money. But every time I glanced at it, that same wrongness crept up my spine. The reflection lag. It took me 3 days to put a name to what I was seeing. My reflection was moving a split second behind my actual movements. When I raised my hand, my reflection raised its hand a heartbeat later. When I turned my head, my reflection followed like it was copying me rather than simply being me. On Thursday morning, while brushing my teeth, I decided to test it. I raised my right hand quickly, unexpectedly. My reflection raised its left hand. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, staring at the impossible sight of my reflection, making the wrong movement. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then my reflection winked at me. I dropped the toothbrush and stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I looked again, everything was normal. My reflection copied my movements perfectly, no lag, no wrong hands, no winking. But I knew what I'd seen. That evening, I video called my co-worker and friend Emma Martinez about a project we were collaborating on. We'd been friends since college, and she knew me well enough to notice when something was off. "David, you look terrible," she said, her face concerned on my laptop screen. "Are you sleeping?" "Just tired," I said, but I was looking past her at my reflection in the dark computer screen. It looked exhausted, older than my actual face, with dark circles under its eyes that I didn't have. "Maybe you should." Emma stopped mid-sentence, her expression changing from concern to confusion. "David, who's that standing behind you?" I spun around. My apartment was empty. "What do you mean?" "On my screen, there's someone standing right behind your chair. He looks exactly like you, but older, different clothes. And he's..." She paused, squinting at her monitor. "He's shaking his head, like he's trying to warn me about something." I turned back to my laptop. On my screen, I could see only myself, alone in frame. Emma, there's nobody here. Are you sure it's not just... He's gone now, she said quietly. But David, I know what I saw. And whoever it was looked terrified. After we ended the call, I sat in my apartment trying to rationalize what had happened. Video compression artifacts, internet lag, trick of the light, all reasonable explanations that felt completely inadequate. Because in my gut, I knew the truth. Something that looked exactly like me was appearing in places I wasn't, and it was trying to communicate. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day researching Margaret Thornfield, mysterious mirror inheritances, and anything I could find about supernatural reflections. What I discovered made me question everything I thought I understood about reality. Margaret Thornfield had been a legitimate estate attorney in Salem, Oregon, from 1952 until her death in 1987. But her specialty wasn't typical estate law. According to archived newspaper articles, she'd built her practice around what she called unusual inheritance cases, estates involving unexplained phenomena, mysterious disappearances, and family curses. Her obituary mentioned that she died under strange circumstances, found in her basement office, surrounded by hundreds of broken mirror fragments. The police report, which I found through a public records search, was even more disturbing. Detective William Torres had written, "Subject discovered at approximately 2:30 a.m. by building security, apparently having suffered massive cardiac arrest while destroying what appeared to be an extensive mirror collection. Most unusual detail. Security cameras showed subject alone in basement, but witness reports from nearby buildings described seeing multiple versions of the same woman in the windows of the building throughout the evening. Investigation ongoing." But the investigation had been closed 3 days later with no explanation in the public record. I found Margaret Thornfield's law firm listed in current Portland business directories. Active business license. Current phone number. Website last updated 3 weeks ago. For a woman who'd been dead for 36 years. I called the number, my hands shaking as I dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp, professional, exactly what you'd expect from an experienced attorney. "Thornfield and Associates. This is Margaret. David Chun, I presume?" My blood turned to ice. "How did you receive the mirror? I've been waiting for your call." Her tone was matter-of-fact, like we were discussing a routine legal matter. "I'm sure you have questions. You're supposed to be dead. Death is more complicated than most people realize, David, especially when you understand the nature of reflection and parallel existence. But we don't have much time for philosophical discussions. You have approximately 72 hours before the mirror completes its initial bonding process." Bonding process? Every antique mirror accumulates what we call reflection residue, imprint of everyone who's ever looked into it. Most mirrors hold only faint impressions, but certain mirrors, particularly those present during moments of intense emotional trauma, can trap entire consciousness patterns. I felt sick. What kind of trauma? The mirror in your possession was present during 17 documented deaths between 1889 and 1987. Suicides, murders, accidental deaths, all occurring in front of that specific mirror. Each death left what you might call a reflection ghost trapped in the glass. That's impossible. Is it? You've already seen the evidence. Your reflection acting independently. Older versions of yourself appearing to others. These aren't hallucinations, David. They're the trapped consciousnesses trying to communicate with you. My mouth was dry as desert sand. Trying to communicate what? That depends on which consciousness is strongest. Some want help finding peace. Others want to warn you about what's coming. And a few, her voice darkened, a few want to trade places with you entirely. How do you know all this? Because I've been researching mirror phenomena for over 70 years across multiple planes of existence. And because your grandfather made a deal with me before he died. What kind of deal? The kind that's about to come due. David, you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because your life depends on understanding the truth about your family's connection to that mirror. But before she could continue, the line went dead. I tried calling back immediately. The number was disconnected. But when I searched online for the business listing I had found that morning, Thornfield and Associates was still there, complete with Margaret's photo, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair. The same woman whose obituary I'd read, dated 36 years ago. Desperate for some anchor to reality, I decided to ask my neighbor Mrs. Patterson about the mirror delivery. She was 78 years old, lived in the apartment across the hall, and had the sharpest eyes and memory of anyone I'd ever met. What she told me shattered my last hope for a rational explanation. "Oh, honey," she said, inviting me into her apartment that smelled like chamomile tea and old photographs. "That mirror has been causing quite a commotion." "What do you mean?" She led me to her kitchen window, which faced the building's entrance. "I sit here every morning with my coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. It's my routine, have been doing it for 22 years since my Harold passed." I waited, knowing Mrs. Patterson never rushed her stories. "Wednesday morning, around 7:30, I saw you struggling to carry that heavy mirror up the front steps. But here's the odd thing. You were wearing a gray suit I'd never seen before, and your hair was styled differently, older looking." My heart started racing. "Mrs. Patterson, I found the mirror on my doorstep Wednesday afternoon. I was at my morning yoga class until 8:30. She gave me a long, steady look. "David, I may be old, but my eyesight is perfect, and my mind is sharp as a tack. I saw you with that mirror at 7:30 a.m., but I also saw you leave for your yoga class at 8 a.m. That's impossible." That's what I thought too, until Thursday morning, when I saw you again, 3 different versions of you, all trying to carry the same mirror up those steps at different times. 7:15 a.m., 7:45 a.m., and 8:10 a.m. Different clothes each time, different ages, but the same face. I felt the world spinning around me. 3 different versions? The youngest one looked like you do right now. Confused, scared. The middle one looked tired, like he'd been through something terrible. But the oldest one... She paused, her expression troubled. The oldest one looked angry. Really angry. And when he finally got the mirror inside, I heard shouting coming from your apartment for about 10 minutes. I wasn't even home Thursday morning. I was at work. "I know, honey, because I also saw you leave for work at your usual time, 9:15 a.m., looking perfectly normal." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "Whatever that mirror is, David, it's brought something with it. Multiple somethings. And they all look exactly like you. Did any of them see you watching?" Her face went pale. The angry one did. "Thursday around noon, I was watering my plants on the fire escape when I heard a tap on your bedroom window. I looked over, and there he was, the older, angry version of you, standing inside your apartment, staring directly at me." "What did he do?" He pressed his hand against the window and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. "But David..." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. His hand left a print on the glass, from the inside, but the handprint was reversed, like he was pressing it from the outside in. That evening, I checked my bedroom window. The handprint was still there, exactly as she described. A perfect palm print that could only have been made from outside the window, but on the interior surface of the glass. And it was definitely my hand. Same size, same proportions, same scar across the palm from a childhood accident. But I had never pressed my hand against that window. That night, I set up a comprehensive surveillance system in my apartment. 3 cameras. One focused directly on the mirror, one covering my bed, and one with a wide shot of the entire bedroom. I also installed motion detection software on my laptop and positioned it to record any movement in the living area. If something was happening while I slept, I was going to have undeniable proof. At 11:30 p.m., I started all the recordings and went to bed, positioning myself so I could observe the mirror from my pillow. What those cameras captured that night will haunt me for the rest of my life. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the mirror's surface began to shimmer like disturbed water. At midnight, a hand pushed through the glass on the other side, my hand, but older, with longer fingers and different scars. Then my older self stepped through the mirror entirely. He was maybe 45, gray at the temples, wearing clothes I didn't recognize but somehow knew I would own someday. He moved through my apartment with familiarity, like he'd been there countless times before. He sat in my kitchen and wrote something in a notebook I'd never seen, occasionally glancing toward my bedroom where I was sleeping. The motion sensors picked up his whispered words. "I'm sorry, little brother. I tried to find another way, but the cycle has to continue. Grandfather couldn't break it. I couldn't break it. Maybe you'll be stronger than both of us." After 20 minutes, he approached my sleeping form. I watched in horror as he reached out and touched my forehead gently, like a blessing or farewell. "The dreams will start tonight," he whispered. "You'll see all the possibilities, all the paths this could take. Remember that every choice has consequences, and every consequence echoes across time." But the most disturbing moment came when he looked directly at the hidden camera. "You're watching this, aren't you? The younger you, I mean. You always were too curious for your own good." He smiled sadly. "The woman who calls herself Margaret Thornfield isn't lying, but she isn't telling you the whole truth either. The mirror isn't just trapping random people who died near it." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "It's trapping every version of you that ever existed across all possible timelines. Every choice you didn't make, every path you didn't take, every life you didn't live. They're all in there, David, and they all want out." He returned to the mirror at 1:23 a.m., but before stepping through, he left something on my kitchen table, a thick manila envelope with my name written in my own handwriting. Then he pressed his hand against the mirror's surface, and it rippled like water as he stepped through and disappeared. When I woke up and checked the recordings, everything was exactly as I'd seen it. The envelope was on my kitchen table, filled with documents that would change my understanding of everything. Bank records showing transactions I'd never made, birth certificates for children I'd never had, marriage licenses to people I'd never met, newspaper clippings mentioning my achievements in careers I'd never pursued. All of it documented proof of lives I had lived in other timelines, other possibilities, and at the bottom of the envelope, a handwritten note. "Every version of you that makes a different choice gets pulled into the mirror. I'm the version that chose to become the guardian of all those lost possibilities. But I'm getting old, and the mirror needs a new guardian. You have 3 days to decide. Accept the responsibility and help all the trapped versions find peace, or refuse and watch as they break free to reclaim the lives they think were stolen from them. Choose wisely. All of our existences depend on it." David Chun, Timeline Guardian, Mirror Realm. Now, before I tell you what happened during those 3 crucial days, and believe me, what David discovered about his family connection to parallel timelines will completely change how you think about the choices you make every single day, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever had a moment where you felt like you were living someone else's life? Where you looked in the mirror and thought, "This isn't who I was supposed to be"? Have you ever made a decision and immediately felt like somewhere, somehow, another version of you made the opposite choice? If this story is making you question the nature of reality itself, if you're starting to look at your own reflection a little differently, if you're wondering about all the paths you didn't take and all the versions of yourself you never became, please hit that like button right now. It tells me that these stories are reaching people who understand that reality is far more complex and mysterious than we usually admit. And if you have your own experiences with impossible reflections, with dreams of lives you never lived, or with family members who seem to know things they couldn't possibly know, share them in the comment below. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories contain the deepest truths about the nature of existence itself. But right now, we need to get back to David's story, because what he learned about his grandfather's real relationship with Margaret Thornfield and the true purpose of the mirror that had been passed down through his family for generations will make you reconsider everything you think you know about family legacies and the debts we inherit from those who came before us. Because David was about to discover that he wasn't just inheriting a supernatural responsibility. He was inheriting a war that had been raging across multiple timelines for over a century, and he was the only one who could end it. The next morning, driven by desperation and the ticking clock of my 3-day deadline, I drove to my grandfather's old house in Salem, Oregon. It had been sold after his death, but I still had his personal effects stored in a facility nearby. I'd been through his belongings before, but this time I was looking for something specific. Any evidence of his connection to Margaret Thornfield and the mirror. What I found, hidden in a false bottom of his old desk, changed everything I thought I knew about my family. A leather journal, worn smooth by decades of handling, filled with my grandfather's meticulous handwriting. But this wasn't the confused rambling of a man with dementia. This was the careful documentation of a scientist studying phenomenon that defied explanation. The first entry was dated 43 years ago. January 15th, 1980. The mirror came to me today, just as it came to my father and his father before him. Margaret Thornfield visited in person to explain what she calls the Chun family obligation. I thought she was a charlatan until she showed me the photographs. Photographs of me at ages I haven't reached yet. Photographs of my son David grown to adulthood, married to women he hasn't met, working at jobs that don't exist yet. Photographs of grandson I don't have, living in a world that looks like science fiction. She explained that the Chin family exists simultaneously across multiple timeline branches. Every major decision we make creates what she calls probability fractures, alternate versions of ourselves living different lives in parallel dimensions. Most families have minimal timeline bleeding. Their alternate selves remain separate, living independent lives across different realities. But certain bloodlines, families with what Margaret calls quantum resonance, experience significant crossover. Our choices don't just affect us. They affect all versions of us across all possible timelines. The mirror isn't trapping random people. It's collecting all the discarded possibilities of our family line. Every path not taken, every choice not made, every life not lived, they all end up reflected in that glass. I flipped through pages of detailed observations, sketches of figures he'd seen in the mirror, and correspondence with Margaret Thornfield spanning decades. But it was the entries from his final year that revealed the full scope of what I was dealing with. March 3rd, 1987, Margaret is dead. They found her surrounded by broken mirror fragments. But I know what really happened. She tried to destroy the primary mirror, the original one that all the others reflect from. She thought if she could break the source, she could free all the trapped possibilities. She was wrong. Breaking the primary mirror doesn't free the possibilities. It unleashes them into our timeline simultaneously. Every version of every Chin family member that ever existed would suddenly occupy the same reality. The paradox would tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. I have to find another solution. Margaret's notes mention something called the Guardian Protocol, a way for one person to voluntarily enter the mirror realm and manage the trapped possibilities from within, to serve as a living bridge between all timelines, helping lost versions find peace and preventing reality collapse. But there's a cost. The Guardian exists simultaneously across all timelines, but fully belongs to none. They can see all possibilities, all choices, all potential outcomes, but they can never again experience the simple reality of living just one life. The final entry was dated just days before his death. June 18th, 1987. I'm too old to serve as guardian. The mirror needs someone younger, someone with the strength to bear the weight of infinite possibilities. My grandson David will inherit the choice when he turns 28, the age when quantum resonance reaches its peak in our bloodline. I've hidden everything he'll need to understand what's happening. If he chooses to become the guardian, he'll save countless versions of our family and maintain the stability of multiple timelines. If he refuses, every discarded possibility will break free, and every version of David Chun that ever existed will try to reclaim the life they believe was stolen from them. The resulting paradox won't just destroy him. It will unravel the quantum foundations of reality itself. I pray he's stronger than I was. I pray he finds a solution I couldn't. The mirror remembers everything, David, including the future. Hidden behind the final page was a sealed envelope addressed to me in my grandfather's handwriting. David, if you're reading this, the mirror has come to you as it came to me. Inside this envelope are Margaret Thornfield original research notes and the complete Guardian Protocol. Study them carefully. The 3-day bonding period isn't arbitrary. It's the amount of time you have before the mirror decides for itself whether you're worthy to be guardian or whether it needs to find other solutions. Remember, every choice echoes across timelines. Choose not just for yourself, but for every version of yourself that ever existed. I believe in you, grandson. I always have. Inside the envelope were dozens of documents in Margaret handwriting, detailed instructions for something called Timeline Integration Protocol, and photographs that made my blood run cold. Pictures of me at every age from birth to old age, living dozens of different lives. David the doctor, David the artist, David the father of 4 children, David the homeless man, David the millionaire, David the soldier, David the teacher, all of them me, but living completely different existences. And at the bottom of the stack, one final photograph. David the guardian, standing in a realm of infinite mirrors, his eyes holding the weight of countless lifetimes. He looked exactly like the older version of me that had stepped through my mirror. That night, I didn't wait for midnight. At 11 p.m., I positioned myself directly in front of the mirror and spoke to it like I was addressing a person. I know you can hear me. I know you're all in there, every version of me that made different choices. I've read Grandfather's journal. I understand what's happening. The mirror's surface began to shimmer, and faces started appearing in the reflection. Dozens of them, all mine but different. Some young, some old, some bearing scars I'd never received, some with eyes that held experiences I'd never had. At midnight exactly, 5 different versions of me stepped through the mirror simultaneously. The guardian David I'd met before, now looking exhausted and strained. A David in his early 30s wearing expensive clothes and a wedding ring I'd never owned. A David in his 20s with burn scars on his arms and paint under his fingernails. A David in his 40s wearing military fatigues and carrying himself like a soldier. And most disturbing of all, a David who looked exactly like me now, but with eyes that held malice I'd never felt. Finally, said the malicious version, his voice my voice but colder. The original timeline David. Do you have any idea how long we've been waiting? The guardian David stepped protectively in front of me. Don't listen to him. He's from the timeline where our family never learned to control the mirror. His entire reality collapsed into chaos. Chaos. The malicious David laughed bitterly. You call this imprisonment control? We've been trapped in that glass prison for decades, watching you live a life that should have been ours. All of our lives are equally valid, said the wealthy David, his voice tired. I lived 43 years building a business empire, raising a family, experiencing love and loss, and everything that makes life meaningful. Then one decision, one single choice to prioritize family over profit, pulled me into the mirror. Now I exist only as a reflection of possibility. The artist David nodded grimly. I died at 25 in a house fire, but my consciousness was pulled into the mirror because I represented a creative path our main timeline never explored. I've been watching you live my life secondhand for years. The soldier David remained silent, but his eyes held a weight that spoke of battles I'd never fought, losses I'd never experienced. The point is, said the guardian David, looking directly at me, the mirror isn't just collecting random versions of us. It's collecting every significant choice our bloodline ever made, preserving all possibilities to prevent paradoxes. But the preservation is killing us, said the malicious David. We're not living, we're just existing, watching, remembering lives we can never return to. I looked around at all these versions of myself, some noble, some broken, some angry, all desperate in their own way. What do you want from me? I asked. Release, they said in unison, their voices creating an eerie harmony. If you become the guardian, explained the current guardian David, you can help us find peace, guide us to acceptance of our roles as possibility preservers, help us let go of the lives we think we lost. Or, said the malicious David, stepping closer, you can let us out, let us return to the main timeline, and reclaim the lives that were stolen from us. That would cause reality collapse, the guardian David warned. Multiple versions of the same person can't occupy the same timeline. The paradox would destroy everything. Maybe everything deserves to be destroyed, the malicious David replied. Maybe this twisted system of possibility imprisonment is worse than chaos. I realized I was standing at the center of a debate that had been raging for decades, possibly centuries. Every version of me that had ever existed was trapped in an eternal argument about the nature of choice, consequence, and the price of maintaining reality. There's a third option, I said slowly, an idea forming as I spoke. What if we don't preserve the possibilities or release them chaotically? What if we integrate them? All 5 versions of me stared at me in silence. Grandfather's notes mentioned timeline integration protocol. What if instead of one person becoming guardian over trapped possibilities, we find a way to merge all the possibilities into one enhanced existence? One David who contains the memories, experiences, and wisdom of all possible Davids. The guardian David looked intrigued, but worried. That's never been attempted. The psychological strain of containing multiple complete lifetimes could destroy your sanity. Or, I said, it could create something stronger than any single timeline could produce. A person who has literally lived every possible life, made every possible choice, learned from every possible mistake. The integration process would be irreversible, warned the wealthy David. You wouldn't be David Chun anymore. You'd be something entirely new. Would I still be me? You'd be more you than any single timeline could ever make you, said the artist David. You'd be the complete realization of every possibility our bloodline ever held. I looked around at all the versions of myself, each representing roads taken and not taken, choices made and unmade. How do we do it? The integration protocol was unlike anything I could have imagined. According to Margaret Thornfield's hidden notes, it required the willing participation of every trapped timeline version and a process she called consciousness confluence. You'll experience every memory, every emotion, every moment of joy and pain that each of us lived, explained the guardian David as the other versions arranged themselves around the mirror. All simultaneously, all at once. Most minds would shatter under that kind of input. But if you survive it, added the soldier David, you'll have access to every skill we learned, every relationship we built, every piece of wisdom we gained across all our different lives. The malicious David looked skeptical, but nodded. I've lived with rage and bitterness for 20 years. If integrating that darkness helps create something better, then maybe my existence won't have been meaningless. At exactly 3 a.m., what Margaret's notes called the hour of deepest reflection, we began. Each version of me placed their hand on the mirror's surface while I stood in the center. The mirror began to glow with increasing intensity, and I felt their memories flooding into my consciousness. The wealthy David's memories of building a tech empire, of falling in love with Sarah Martinez, of raising twin daughters who became doctors. The artist David's memories of creating paintings that moved people to tears, of struggling with poverty, of dying young but fulfilled. The soldier David's memories of combat, of brotherhood, of protecting innocence, of the weight of necessary violence. The guardian David's memories of decades spent managing timeline conflicts, of loneliness, of sacrifice of greater good. Even the malicious David's memories of watching his reality crumble, of losing everyone he cared about, of the rage that comes from powerlessness. All of it poured into me like a dam bursting. 43 years of experiences I'd never had, skills I'd never learned, relationships I'd never built, losses I'd never suffered, triumphs I'd never achieved. I should have been overwhelmed. My mind should have fragmented under the impossible weight of multiple complete lifetimes. Instead, I felt whole. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was experiencing the full scope of human possibility. Every choice I'd ever wondered about, I now remembered making. Every path I'd ever wondered about, I now remembered walking. The integration took 6 hours. When it was complete, the mirror showed only my reflection, but I was changed. I could see the experiences of all my other selves in my eyes, could access their skills and memories as easily as my own. But more importantly, I understood something about choice and possibility that no single timeline could have taught me. Every choice we make creates infinite versions of ourselves. But those versions aren't separate people. They're facets of who we could become. The Chun family mirror hadn't been trapping alternate selves. It had been preserving the complete spectrum of human potential. And now that potential was unified in me. I was David Chun, software engineer. But I was also David Chun, businessman, artist, soldier, guardian, and yes, even a version who had chosen darkness over light. I was every choice I'd ever made, and every choice I'd never made, integrated into one consciousness that could draw on the wisdom of infinite possibilities. Epilogue. The new reality, minutes 45 to 47. 1 year later. The mirror still stands in my bedroom, but it no longer traps possibilities. Instead, it serves as a window between timelines, allowing me to help other families facing similar quantum resonance issues. Margaret Thornfield, the real Margaret, not the timeline guardian who had been managing mirror cases for decades, visits occasionally. She's fascinated by the success of the integration protocol and is documenting the process for other bloodlines facing similar challenges. My life is impossibly rich now. I run a successful tech company using business skills from my wealthy timeline. I create art that moves people using techniques from my artist timeline. I help veterans with PTSD using understanding from my soldier timeline. I manage supernatural cases using wisdom from my guardian timeline. And I've learned to recognize and redirect the darkness in myself using hard-won insights from my malicious timeline. Most remarkably, I'm in a relationship with Sarah Martinez. Not the Sarah from my wealthy timeline's memories, but a Sarah from this timeline who I met through art classes I decided to take using my integrated artistic abilities. She knows everything about what happened, about the mirror, the timelines, the integration. She says it doesn't matter that my experiences span multiple realities because the person I am now, the integrated David, is someone who could never have existed in any single timeline. You're not just David Chun, she told me last week. You're the realization of every possibility David Chun ever held. You're what humans could become if they had access to every choice they'd ever made. But the most important change is this. I no longer wonder about the paths I didn't take. I remember taking them all. So there you have it. The complete story of David Chun and the mirror that showed him every life he could have lived. But here's what's been keeping me up at night since I finished researching this story. While I was writing it, I started having dreams about lives I'd never lived. Dreams where I was a doctor saving lives. Dreams where I was a teacher inspiring students. Dreams where I made completely different choices and became someone entirely different. Is it possible that David's story isn't unique? That all of us are constantly creating alternate versions of ourselves with every choice we make, and somewhere, somehow, those other versions are living the lives we wonder about? Think about it. Have you ever looked in a mirror and felt like the person staring back had lived experiences you couldn't quite remember? Have you ever had a skill you couldn't explain, or felt drawn to a path that made no logical sense based on your actual life history? Have you ever met someone and felt like you knew them from somewhere impossible? What if those feelings aren't coincidences? What if they're glimpses of the other versions of yourself, the ones living the lives you almost chose? I want to know what you think. Have you ever felt like you were living just one small piece of who you could become? Have you ever wondered about the roads not taken, the choices not made, the person you might have been if just one decision had gone differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about the dreams where you lived different lives, the moments where you felt like you were channeling skills from somewhere else, the times when you looked at your reflection and wondered if that was really all you were capable of being. If this story made you think about the infinite possibilities contained within every choice you make, if it made you realize that every decision creates ripples across realities we can't even imagine, hit that like button right now. It tells me you understand that life is far more mysterious and full of potential than most of us dare believe. And if you know someone who's ever felt trapped by their choices, someone who's ever wondered about the path they didn't take, or someone who's ever looked in a mirror and seen more possibilities than just one reflection, share this story with them. Maybe they need to hear that every version of themselves they've ever imagined is real somewhere, living some life, making some difference. Subscribe for more stories that explore the hidden connections between choices and consequences, between possibility and reality. Because next week I'm investigating the case of the woman who started receiving phone calls from every version of herself that had ever existed, and the warning that saved not just her life, but the lives of everyone she'd ever been. Remember, every choice you make creates infinite possibilities. Every path you don't take doesn't disappear. It just gets lived by another version of you in another reality. Maybe David Chen's story isn't about supernatural mirrors and timeline integration. Maybe it's about recognizing that you already contain every possibility you've ever imagined. You just need to learn how to access them. Look at yourself in the mirror tonight. Really look and ask yourself, what would happen if you could remember every life you'd never lived, every choice you'd never made, every version of yourself you'd never become? The answer might surprise you. Until next time, keep your eyes open for the infinite possibilities hiding in every reflection, every choice, every moment where your life could branch into something completely different. And remember, you're not just who you are right now. You're every person you've ever had the potential to become. Sweet dreams. And pay attention to what you dream about. It might be more real than you think.